follows. As to count 1 of the charge, the defendant, Tracey Nix, is not guilty.
The destruction that has come from this process is pretty unfathomable as well. You know, my kids are dead, but I've lost a lot more.
Tracey Nix not guilty of aggravated manslaughter, but this forgetful grandma is still waking up in jail. This morning, we're talking to insiders asking, did the trial's outcome match up with what they know about the case? And bail denied for the real estate brothers accused of years of sex assaults. What we're learning about the trophies that they allegedly kept. Also this hour, we've got Diddy's defense team accusing prosecutors of being sexist and puritanical. We have a sex expert joining us live to differentiate between unusual acts between consenting adults versus deviant, dangerous behavior. Plus, the defense in the Ponzi scheme murder trial could be tipping the scales. We're taking a closer look at the attorneys who were fighting on behalf of Natalie Cochran. It's all coming up next for you right here on Opening Statements. A good Thursday morning to you and welcome to Opening Statements. I'm your host, Julie Grant. Are you ready for some coffee and some court? That's what I like to say the show is like. We get you all warmed up and ready to go for the big Court TV live day ahead. So go ahead, grab that cup of coffee right now. It's time for my opening statement. In some trials, there are no winners. Tracey Nix's is one of them. The forgetful grandma acquitted of manslaughter, aggravated manslaughter rather, and convicted of leaving a child in a car longer than 15 minutes. Mixed verdict, split verdict with that jury. But nobody won this case. Let's be very clear. An innocent baby is dead, and there's no penalty that Tracey Nix could possibly get that could bring that baby back. Did this trial bring justice for baby Yuri? Baby Yuri was what this trial was about. Or were the already heartbroken family members just traumatized even more from going through this trial? Is this conviction for grandma enough justice for baby Yuri? I will say this, grandma sure got a fair trial. We know that. The jury wasn't allowed to know about baby Ezra's death on grandma's watch. That was the correct legal ruling too, by the way, my friends, to keep it out. But you can't help but wonder if the jury would have arrived at the same verdict if they knew the whole entire picture. It seems that in this case, everybody has lost something. Baby Yuri's parents have lost 2 of their children. Tracey Nix has lost her freedom. Nobody was victorious. Baby Yuri and baby Ezra deserved far better. They were helpless and they were failed. May they rest in peace and may they never be forgotten. That's my opening statement. Let me know if you like it. Right now, it's time for your daily docket.
How would you describe the blue star reaction that you yourself observed inside Mr. Chen's apartment?
It was very intense and long duration. It was probably the most I've ever seen on a reaction of the blue star on a crime scene.
Testimony continues in the murder trial for Jason Chen. Court begins in Tennessee at 9 a.m. Eastern Time. In West Virginia, we've got testimony in the Ponzi scheme murder trial continuing for Natalie Cochran. This one kicks back off at 9 a.m. Eastern. And in Florida, we've got Derek Rosa back in court for a status conference. He's accused of killing his own mother. That case is set for 8 a.m. this morning. Now to our top story. Tracey Nix and her defense attorneys are already looking ahead to her appeal. A jury finding her not guilty of aggravated manslaughter in the death of her 7-month-old granddaughter, Muriel Schock. But jurors did find her guilty of a 3rd-degree felony of leaving a child in a car for more than 15 minutes. So she's looking at a maximum penalty of up to 5 years in prison. Potentially, it could be 8 years if the prosecutors are able to establish aggravating factors at her sentencing hearing. Now, Nix's daughter and the baby's mother spoke briefly after the verdict. Kayla says the verdict is a win for baby Yuri.
I was relieved to hear that there was going to be accountability and ownership and a conclusion to this part of this story. One of the things that we have struggled with through this whole case has been the exclusion of my other story, which is my son that drowned in her care. And so for us, this is a win for Yuri. But I have a son named Ezra, and he has not been spoken of. And he died in her care. And I don't have any accountability or any answers for that. And I continue to look for those answers to what happened in that case and why that case was not worthy of prosecution at that time. The daughter and me had a very hard time with her being taken, and I ended up stepping aside for that moment. And it isn't something that I would ever call a win for me. It is a win for justice for my daughter.
Again, baby Yuri's mother, Kayla, speaking there. Now, during deliberations, the court heard from some witnesses who could potentially be called on appeal. The defense was proffering the testimony of one mental health specialist who, by the way, is going to be on our show in the 9 o'clock hour. Now, Tracey Nix is set to be sentenced on April the 3rd at 9 a.m. And of course, we will be there for that. And this morning here on Opening Statements, we have two very special guests joining us to talk about this case. Two people who arguably know more than anybody about this case. I want to welcome them in now. Criminal Investigations Detective with the Hardy County Sheriff's Office, Detective Alice Fletcher, is with us. And the Managing Editor of the Herald Advocate, Mr. Tom Stake, is with us as well. Good morning to you both. Thank you for coming on Opening Statements. Detective Alice, I'd like to begin with you, please. What's your reaction to the verdict?
Well, initially, I think I realized very quickly that, just as Kayla mentioned, there was going to be no win in terms of how this is going to affect our community, being as close as it is. But justice for Uriel, was done, and that was a relieving factor. And, quickly I realized that now we have to realize what's moving forward, what's next steps for our community in terms of healing.
Sure, Detective, just moving forward, that healing. I'm glad you mentioned that. Tom, I wanted to ask you about the community's sentiments about this, the healing. You were the first one to break the story with the death of baby Ezra and have followed it through its progression. Would you share with us the feeling of the members of the community who've been following the case, hoping for justice for Yuri?
Absolutely. This has been one of the most divisive events, stories that we have encountered here in this community. In that healing process began yesterday with that verdict, but it is going to take a while. Tensions were even flaring after the room. There has been a very vocal set that has been in Tracey Nix's court this entire time, and in that have been on the side of with Kayla and her husband Drew, and or the baby's father Drew, and Uriel. So one of the things that I saw still on the way to work today was there were signs that after this arrest was made for Ezra and Uriel, yard signs, out today. So I'm curious how long that process will take for the community fully to come back together.
Sure. And Tom, thank you for that. And I just want to acknowledge, we want to hear every word you're saying. And unfortunately, we're having a little bit of problems with the technology, and we're getting kind of every other word. So we're going to work to repair that. Detective Alice, of course, I have more questions for you. A lot of people want to know, will the case involving Ezra be re-examined? We heard Kayla speaking to the public in that little press conference that was had after the verdict was announced, and saying that she was going to be going back and meeting with officials to hopefully revisit this, seeming unsatisfied with the fact that charges weren't brought the first time. What can we expect to happen next with baby Ezra's death case?
As of this time, we have not had those conversations with the state attorney's office. But now that this part is concluded, that is something that we will be bringing up and looking into to see what the options are going to be.
Appreciate it, Detective. Detective, I want to play a clip for you. Last night on our show here on Court TV, Closing Arguments with Vinnie Politan, Vinnie spoke with Tracey Nix's defense attorneys. All three of them came on the program, and they shared something that shocked me, shocked everyone in our newsroom, because we hadn't heard this before. They were saying that Tracey is not the one responsible for Ezra's death. I'll play the clip for you, and then I'll get your reaction on the other side.
Nix's proffered testimony reveals that he decided to go shopping and discussed it with defendant. After both Ezra and defendant fell asleep, he recalled tiptoeing out of the room. Later, he received a call from defendant asking him if he had taken Ezra, and when he answered no, she immediately hung up the call. He also recalled that he has previously seen Ezra try and fail to open a door in the home. So the bottom line is, it's a good narrative, but it is not true that she's responsible for the first death.
Okay, so again, coming from the defense team and saying that while Grandma Tracey was asleep and so was baby Ezra, Grandpa was awake and in the house, and then made a point to leave. Tracey's husband, he goes and leaves, and thinking that little Ezra can't unlock a door and that there's no way he's going to get out. So they're essentially pointing the finger at Grandpa here. Detective, what's your response to their contention that it wasn't Tracey's fault?
Given at this time that I do not know if the state attorney is going to relook at that case, I don't want to make comments on a case that could potentially end up being open and reinvestigated for possible criminal prosecution, no matter who the defendant would be.
Understood. We certainly respect that, Detective Alice. Would you share with us your impressions of Tracey Nix? Surely you've come across a lot of different defendants. This one is maybe kind of atypical. You know, we have somebody who served as a principal for a very long time, a grandma, no criminal history in the past. What did you think when you started working this case, and how did she seem to you?
When I encountered Tracey Nix, I genuinely felt as though she was distraught and really beside herself. However, she was very cooperative. She was very respectful. And I do believe she was very honest and open.
Detective, tell me, is there any truth to Tracey Nix having lost her job as a principal due to forgetfulness?
That is something I do not know.
Okay. How about when it comes to her sentence, Detective? I'm assuming here she's a prior record score of 0. Correct me if I'm wrong on that. Where do you think the judge is going to come down on sentencing for her, and why, please?
You are correct. She does have that sentencing score of 0. So really, I have no idea what to expect come April 3rd. I hope that whatever he decides or comes across is appropriate and aligns with the justice for Uriel that the family has been seeking.
Sure. I think everybody certainly wants justice. And, you know, for everybody who feels unsatisfied with his verdict, I think that's the best word I can use. I think a lot of people are just feeling like, it doesn't feel like you want a verdict to feel. It feels kind of weird, kind of like things are left in a balance. And I think a lot of people are still struggling with how could this happen? Do you have any theory on this, whether this was an intentional act or whether this was forgetfulness or something else medical going on with her that caused this?
I definitely don't feel as though, as I interacted with Tracey Nix, that she was deceitful by any way in making me think that it wasn't intentional when it was. I don't think it was something she did on purpose. I think she genuinely forgot that Yuri was in the back seat. This happens, unfortunately, way too often. People get caught up in life. They get caught up in daily tasks and, what's next. And, when you have a young child in the back seat who's being very quiet, you can forget.
Detective Alice Fletcher, we certainly appreciate your time and you answering all of the questions that we have for you, to the best of your ability. We know you have a lot more work ahead of you, and we thank you for your time and your service. Take good care. Hope to speak again soon. We're going to hit a break here on opening statements. When we come back, here's what's coming up.
He believes he's innocent. I believe he's innocent. And we're going to fight this case with all of our might until we don't have to fight anymore.
Here's the latest. Diddy's lawyers are calling the prosecution team sexist. Sexist, that's right. They're saying that the way they're viewing the freak-offs is puritanical. They're saying that they need to loosen up, essentially. We've got a sex expert joining us live to talk on the show to break down what's normal and what's dangerous. Plus, the wealthy Alexander brothers denied bail after being accused of years of sex assault. Now we're learning of their alleged trophies. Yeah, trophies. We're going to explain what police say they are. Don't go away.
Tonight on Court TV.
I'm Vinny Politan. Welcome to Closing Arguments. We have a big hour ahead here.
Your deplorable actions are unforgivable.
The community still doesn't know how this Boston police officer died.
He can't prove one element of his case. It was a dramatic day, a dramatic moment inside the courtroom.
What's happening here?
It's unreal. Let me show you exactly what happened.
Closing Arguments with Vinny Politan. Tonight at 8/7 Central. Only on Court TV.
The indictment alleges that between at least 2010 and at least 2021, the Alexander brothers worked together and with others to repeatedly and violently drug, sexually assault, and rape dozens of female victims.
From selling high-end real estate to allegedly running an illegal sex trafficking ring, the Alexander brothers are what's trending in true crime. So on Wednesday, a federal judge denied bail for Oren and Alon Alexander, who are twins, and their older brother, Tal. Now, this keeps the real estate brokers in jail while they await their pending cases. Now, prosecutors are alleging that the brothers used their wealth, their power, and their influence to take advantage of women for more than a decade. Law enforcement agents have spoken to over 40 women who are claiming that they were either raped or sexually assaulted in some way or drugged by at least one of the Alexanders. Each brother has been accused of forcible rape by at least 10 women. Yes, you heard me correctly. Each brother has at least 10 accusations of forcible rape by different women. Now, we're asking, how dangerous are these guys? The big issue when they were, their attorneys were going before the court on Wednesday was, should they get bail? What if they got bail? How bad would that be for society? Let's talk about that. Let's bring in our power panel. We have incredible guests standing by. Criminal defense attorney and former prosecutor Michael J. Brown is here, as well as retired FBI special agent and the host of Break the Case, and Jennifer Coffindeffer is here, and criminal defense and civil attorney John Phillips here as well. Good morning to you all. Agent Coffindeffer, I want to start with you, please. How dangerous do you think these brothers are?
Well, they seem very dangerous if you believe the pleadings that are on file. I mean, this is really something, this indictment. It, of course, mimics Diddy's. You're talking about rape. You're talking about sexual assault. You're talking about sexual trafficking. You're talking about recording these individuals, keeping these tapes as some sort of trophy or to later review, perhaps, for your sexual pleasure. Very dangerous to me, especially when you talk about the number of women that were violated allegedly.
Jennifer, thank you for that. Michael J. Brown, let me go to you next, please. Your thoughts on how dangerous these brothers are?
Good morning, Julie. Well, if these allegations are to be believed, this has been going on for a tremendous amount of time. I think since 2011, the amount of alleged victims that they encountered was tremendous. So yes, I think if these allegations are true, these are definitely dangerous individuals. One of the things, though, you have to remember is the defense team did present to the judge the possibility of posting a significant amount of bail coupled with this home detention and having security guards who would actually work in conjunction with the U.S. Marshal's office. That was flat out denied by the judge. But that's always a possibility because that would ensure that they're not going to be among the community and they'll remain in that jurisdiction in that area until the trial. So that was something that was, again, that was rejected by the judge.
Oh, that's really helpful. Michael, thank you for that. I want to share, this is the perfect segue, something else rejected by the judge. Orrin Alexander's plea, talking about his wife being 9 months pregnant, wanting to get out. Let's take a listen to that.
Your Honor, my wife is 9 months pregnant, due any day now with our first child. Her family's in Brazil. She's counting on me to be with her during labor.
That's something, you have a very good attorney. You're gonna have a hearing tomorrow before the division judge, and that judge will consider any argument regarding a bond.
Yeah, and so that was from his first court appearance. I should have noted that, but again, denied. They're all in, they're all staying in. John Phillips, last but not least here on this, want to get your take on these guys, please.
Yeah, part of the issue here is certainly the predatory nature of the behavior, right? So there's dozens of women who have come forward, and on top of that, you found this stash of digital evidence in the closet that has some of these women and other women that they've got to identify in various states of intoxication. Some they allege has passed out, most to all of which have had have been raped or sexually assaulted, or, there's questions of consent that are going to require further interviews. So it's going to be a compelling case. Anytime you have wealthy, prominent, may I say even good-looking defendants who come to court and plead for sympathy and kind of use drama, we all kind of lean forward a little bit more.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, isn't that the truth? Yeah, I can't wait to see the defense team these guys put together. John and Michael, you two might be getting a call. Let us know if they call you. I say that, but a lot of truth said in jest. Okay, so let's move on to another aspect of this. This has a lot of people talking. So there is more than just criminal acts being alleged here, according to what's contained in the search warrant. So we wanted to dive into this. Investigators saying that videos of the alleged sex acts were seized from an apartment shared by Tal and Orrin back in December. Materials that law enforcement officials are calling trophies, that these guys kept trophies, they say, that included explicit sexual videos and photographs. Prosecutors allege that the materials were taken from a hard drive found in a closet, which showed Orrin, Alan, and others with women in different states of intoxication and undress, some appearing to be unaware that they were being recorded. Defense attorneys argue that prosecutors' account of these trophies doesn't describe non-consensual sex. All right, our question: are these trophies going to come in as evidence, these videotapes, these photos? Essentially, what can we expect to see coming into this trial against these guys? Jennifer Coffendever, let me go back to you. What do you think of this, please?
Well, I think certainly they're going to try to get these in. It shows the deviance. It's also going to be hardcore evidence. The one type of evidence no defendant wants to face is actual video recording and audio recording, mimicking the crimes that they're accused of committing. And also there could be other victims that are exposed once they really data mine the individuals in these videos. So yes, Julie, it's strong evidence, and I believe it will come in likely.
Yeah, thank you for that. Michael J. Brown, to you next, please. Your thoughts on this?
Yeah, Julie, you bet they're coming in. Unless there's some problem with the evidentiary foundation, they are absolutely coming in, and they are really the smoking gun probably in this case. They'll be able to use those videos to establish two basic elements. Number one is, I expect that they will depict sexual intercourse, which is what the rape statute will require. And the second part is without consent, because if these videos depict unconscious or intoxicated females who are way beyond the ability to consent, well, now you have that lack of consent element established as well. So yes, I think this will be very powerful testimony and evidence before a jury. And again, that could be the nail in the coffin.
Yeah, I think you're right, Michael. Thank you for that. John Phillips, would you take us home on this point, please?
I agree with my co-counsel. You know, essentially, particularly for the victims that are going to testify live, I mean, how powerful is it to be able to introduce victim by victim, you know, what they're going to describe as the worst night of their life? And certainly there's going to be motions in limine to cut this out and add this. But at the end of the day, you don't just have accusations, right? You're going to have non-consensual sex, non-consensual videotape, which should be enough to push these guys to the kind of evil level. In prosecuting cases, you tend to succeed more when you've got the true bad guy on the other side, and this would push them towards that trigger.
Right. Great points from you all. I think this case is going to be huge. It's going to be huge. It's just kind of starting to circulate. I think this is going to be quite a fight. We're here for it all. Thank you for the great discussion. And Agent Coffendeffer had mentioned Diddy, and this case makes you think of Diddy. I know it makes me think of that. And guess what? We're talking about him after this break as his lawyers are going after the prosecution. That's right. They're calling them sexist and puritanical because of the way they're viewing his freak-offs. Well, we are bringing in a sex expert next to break down some of the unusual sexual acts between consenting adults and deviant, dangerous behavior that's being alleged in Diddy's case. Plus, testimony in the Ponzi scheme murder trial for Natalie Cochran resumes this morning. We're analyzing the defense strategy and whether it could tip the scales. Lawyers for Sean Diddy Combs are taking a brand new tactic with his defense team. And this one, it might surprise you. So this morning, we're shining our spotlight on their latest court filing. So the defense is going on the offensive. They're going after the prosecution, calling them sexist and puritanical. This new filing revolves around 9 recordings of sex acts that are considered important evidence in this sex trafficking case being alleged against Diddy. His defense team is saying that all these videos show are consensual sexual activity between willing adults. In a letter to the Manhattan federal court, the defense team writes, quote, "The case is sexist because the government's theory perpetuates stereotypes of female victimhood and lack of agency. The prosecution reflects a paternalistic view that the government is here to protect women who cannot be trusted to make their own decisions about sex and are not capable of consenting to sex that prosecutors view as outside the norm." The defense team is asking for the videos to be turned over for additional investigation. All right, so let's dig in. I have 2 great guests still with me. Retired FBI Special Agent Jennifer Coffendeffer, and want to welcome in now clinical sex therapist and professor Dr. Laurel Steinberg. And Dr. Laurel, welcome to the show. And I want to begin with you, please. So I want to show you a little bit more of what they're alleging here in this filing. So they're saying that these freak-offs are harmless, essentially. Harmless adult activities. If we take a look at this filing, they're writing that, like many Americans in the privacy of their own bedrooms, they sometimes film their sexual activity. And these videos show that the person alleged in the indictment to be victim 1 not only consented, but that she thoroughly enjoyed herself. So, Dr. Laurel, how mainstream is this type of activity?
How mainstream is recording sex acts and with partners.
Right.
Just because it may not happen in every home in every situation doesn't mean it's not, common or appropriate. The issue is is are the participants able to consent with respect to age and being sober? And so, sure, people record themselves all the time and use those recordings in a variety of ways.
Dr. Laurel, what about multiple people being involved? Because when we think of these freak-offs, we're thinking of these wild parties, multiple people together, partner swapping, lots of baby oil, we know. How common might that be, these sex parties where multiple people engage?
I don't have specific numbers on how common those activities are. I don't know that people who engage in them talk about them so freely, but I certainly in my practice have heard about all sorts of sex acts and group sex and sex clubs, and I think that does happen with wonderful community leaders, parents, professionals of all kind. That's not the issue in this particular case. The issue is whether they were able to consent to the activities with respect to age and sobriety.
Bingo, bingo, Dr. Laurel. The consent and the ability to make such a decision and willfully consent, as you said, and is inebriation a part of this? Agent Coffindeffer, that's where I want to bring you in with these allegations. So the government is taking issue with what they say is trafficking and forcible inebriation, forcible drugging, and even the rehabilitation after the fact that these women were so beat up essentially after engaging in these freak-offs that they had to have, IV drips and things like that and stay out of the public eye. What do you think, Agent Coffindeffer, when you hear that the defense team is essentially saying, oh, prosecution, you're just kind of being prudish here and criticizing the freak-offs?
Well, it's interesting, Julie, because they seem to have cherry-picked out 9 particular tapes. What about all the rest of the tapes? What about the dozens of witnesses? What about the other individuals involved in this? What about the drugs that were allegedly used in these freak-offs as tools to undermine their ability to consent? What about all these witnesses that are going to come forward and say, listen, I didn't consent? What about the video we have of him physically hurting individuals? We've seen one of those videos, right? So when you add up the totality of the evidence, I don't think it's going to match with these 9 tapes, maybe 9 specific situations where there was some consent.
I really appreciate that. Great points. So it seems like the way they're advocating for Diddy, and look, these are advocates, paid advocates, they're doing their job, right? It seems like they're almost saying, hey, federal government, you're getting into personal business and you're sex shaming Diddy because of his choices and his lifestyle and his parties and all of that. Dr. Laurel, when you hear about these allegations from the defense team, I'm curious what you think.
Well, I think it's really, really important for us to, as a community, remain sex positive and crime negative, and take a page from Christian Grey and Anastasia Steele from 50 Shades of Grey, where Mr. Combs has a motley crew of attorneys that no doubt regret having been employed by him historically, and they could have met in conference rooms and created legal documents that would have secured that consent in writing. Just because sexual activities seem different than what we hear about at dinner tables and at community meetings, I would consider varied sex acts to be sort of like equivalent to mint chocolate chip ice cream being sold at Haagen-Dazs. I may not get it, but I respect that it exists. The issue is about consent.
I really appreciate the insight in your attitude, Dr. Laurel. You're so pleasant and polished, and I love the Christian Grey comparison. I feel like if Diddy's lawyers are smart, they're going to do what you just did and say, yeah, he's like the Christian Grey, but the real-life Christian Grey with all that money and power. So on the other side of this, of course, these allegations, they're very serious, right? We're a country that we fight every day to uncover sex trafficking that's going on, right? And members of law enforcement, like Agent Coffindeffer, who've served for many years, are working day in and day out to stop victimization going on. And so, Agent Coffindeffer, I want to show you another piece of this where the defense team is claiming that there's no evidence of any violence any coercion, any threats or manipulation, no evidence that anybody is incapacitated or under the influence of drugs or excessive alcohol consumption. There's no evidence of sex trafficking, so they say. What do you think as you read that paragraph there, Agent Coffindaffer?
Well, I think, again, they take a complete juxtaposition from the indictment that we've all read that is very specific to what happened, and it certainly does not mimic what they wrote there. So they may be cherry picking out of thousands and thousands and thousands of hours of tape a few instances where something was consensual that occurred between two individuals, but their big problem is the other 99% of what's on those tapes.
Right. You're so right, Agent Coffindaffer. Diddy's got big problems, as we know. And I think this is a little taste of where the defense is headed at trial. It seems like they're going to say, okay, you're putting our freak-offs on trial, so that's what we're going to do. We're going to stand by what happened and make the government prove every little allegation. Great discussion with you both. Agent Coffindaffer is coming with us. Dr. Laurel Steinberg, it's been a pleasure talking with you. Thank you for sharing your expertise and your insight with us. We hope to have you on again sometime soon.
Pleasure to be here. Thank you
so much. When we come back here, we're talking about the Ponzi scheme murder case. Natalie Cochran, accused of giving her husband a lethal dose of insulin. We'll talk about how the defense is tipping the scales of justice. And in our next hour, brand new reaction to grandmother Tracey Nix's verdict. We have a forgotten baby syndrome expert. In fact, the expert that the defense team was going to call, Dr. Diamond, joining us live in our 9 a.m. hour. So we're going to hear his medical take on Tracey Nix. Be right back. A Ponzi scheme and a deadly poisoning.
A former pharmacist already convicted in a federal fraud case.
Now stands trial for the murder of her husband.
The financial crime gives rise to murder.
Did Natalie Cochran kill to cover up other crimes?
We're not here to obtain convictions. We're here to obtain the truth.
Now a jury will decide her fate.
And Court TV will bring you every minute.
The Ponzi scheme murder trial. Live coverage today, only on Court TV.
Now for what's tipping the scales of justice in the Ponzi scheme murder trial of Natalie Cochran, the pharmacist accused of killing her husband Michael by injecting him with a lethal dose of insulin. Well, day one kicked off Wednesday with the defense opening statement saying that Michael Cochran suffered from substance abuse.
Mr. Cochran fancied himself to be a bodybuilder. He wanted to be the Arnold Schwarzenegger, Mr. Universe. And what did he do to that in that regard? Mr. Cochran has imported, well, let's call it medication, from Mexico, online, from sources that were not approved by any FDA or any legitimate American government sources. And he was taking medication, steroids, that were not for human consumption.
So they're saying he was taking steroids, and that's what caused his death. So Cochran has already pleaded guilty to running a Ponzi scheme that defrauded people out of millions of dollars. She's serving an 11-year-long prison sentence, and she's looking at potentially life in prison if she's convicted of murder. We're asking this morning, is the drug abuse defense an effective one? Could it tip the scales? Let's bring in our criminal defense attorney experts, Michael J. Brown and John Phillips. John, would you start us off here? You like this defense or not?
It's interesting. You know, you always look to try to blame the victim and cast any dispersions you can. And here, you know, the use of steroids is kind of multifaceted, right? It's, okay, he's engaged in illegal behavior, it was mood altering, and it made him so very sick at times that, you know, of course she didn't have anything to do with this. He took his own life in a way by these illegal drugs that, you know, are prescribable, I guess, not, you know, used according to prescription here.
Sure.
They got to start somewhere.
Yeah, that's where they're starting. I mean, it has a lot of people going, huh? You know, and we know the prosecution, Michael J. Brown, is saying that, look, she poisoned her husband. She used insulin to do it. They say it was so that he wouldn't discover her Ponzi scheme that was ripping off their family and their friends to support their lavish lifestyle. Curious what you think of the defense theory here and whether it'll work.
Well, I think a couple of things, Julie. In terms of the cause of death, anytime you can attack the actual cause of death and attribute it to something other than the defendant's actions, that's helpful. That's something that the prosecution has to prove beyond a reasonable doubt. In addition to that, in terms of the Ponzi scheme, you never have to prove motive. That's never an element, but I have to tell you from a practical standpoint, and I know both you and John know this from your trial work, juries want to hear about a motive. They want to know why somebody would kill somebody, especially when it's their spouse, the father of their children. So here, the prosecution alleges, well, you know what? He discovered this Ponzi scheme and he was going to turn her into the federal authorities. Well, the defense has really hammered away at the fact that, no, he was in on it. He knew about it. He was actually spending part of the proceeds. So that kind of takes away that motive aspect. So I do like both of those parts. The one thing I want to add, in addition, I hope the defense uses the Ponzi scheme in their favor. What I mean by that is, obviously it came in that there was a pretrial ruling, but now you have somebody who's very calculated, very intelligent, and she was able to run this Ponzi scheme. Well, just the same, you need to flip that in your favor and say, hey, if she's that somebody who takes such precautions and planning, you think she's going to actually kill her husband by simply injecting him with insulin with neighboring witnesses around? So that's something that I hope they use in their defense, as opposed to just the prosecution using it.
Yeah, great points. Michael, thank you for that. I want to get both of your impressions of the defense attorney Matthew Victor, because you both know, you know, likability matters in the courtroom. It does, even if you have an unlikable client. You know, if you're likable as the advocate, you know, sometimes you could, you know, have the jury, not focus so much on your client and their behavior. So, John Phillips, what did you think of the defense attorney? I'm gonna play let me just ask you that question before we play the next clip. What do you think of his work?
You had to go to me first here. Bar rules, and I'm licensed in 8 states, really don't love when we comment on other counsel or judges. But I hearken back to the movie My Cousin Vinny, right, which we all loved. Mm-hmm. There's a point where Vinny is great and entertaining and charismatic and kind of whimsical. There's a point where he's annoying. And I'm not sure with this attorney and kind of his style, how that will just, work with the jury.
Gotcha. You know, the accent, I have to tell you, I love the accent. As soon as he opened his mouth and started talking, I'm here for it. Michael J. Brown, what'd you think of him?
I'll agree with John on his assessment. We don't like to, make negative comments on our colleagues. But, one of the things that I picked up, and I think both of you probably did too, which I do like, when you showed the opening pictures, Julie, and you showed the defendant, she was with her husband, very striking woman. And I think what they did, and I hope this is intentional, they kind of made her into a librarian. If you look at her look now, they've really softened up her look, the glasses, the hair, and they really toned it down, which I think is going to be very beneficial to them. So although John and I want to sit here and give you a lot of criticisms about this attorney, if that was an intentional act, I think John would agree that was really a good move.
Yeah, it was. I'm with you. You're right. She does look like a librarian. That's how she looks. And some of our viewers were saying she was looking kind of smug at certain points. And so we'll have to watch today and try to notice her facial expressions as the testimony continues. Oh, we're out of time. I wouldn't trust
her around my Dewey Decimal System, though. I wouldn't trust her around the Dewey Decimal System.
John Phillips, Michael J. Brown, thank you both so much. That is it for opening statements. We'll be right back live.